The first sound was not a warning. It was the crack of oak and iron tearing against coral, a noise that split the night and flung men from their hammocks. Barrels broke free and thundered down the gangway. The Zeewijk heaved, shuddered, and went still. Beneath the surf came a deeper sound, the steady rush of seawater pouring into the hold. It was June 9th, 1727. The Dutch East India Company's Zeewijk had been at sea for months, bound for Batavia with soldiers, sailors, passengers, and cargo stacked tight as hope. Captain John Steins, chasing days, had cut in toward the uncharted Abrolhos Islands off New Holland. The moon was bright, the water looked harmless, and Half Moon Reef waited where no map could save them. The first impact tore the hull. Every wave lifted the ship and slammed her back down. Orders flew, helm over, anchors down, man the pumps, but the reef held fast. By dawn, the lower decks were flooding and the sea around them was flecked with wreckage. The nearest land was a pale strip of coral and sand so low it seemed the sea might change its mind and cover it at any hour. No trees, no shade, no water. They ferried survivors ashore in the longboat with whatever could be wrenched from the Zeewijk: barrels of water, biscuit, salted meat, the carpenter's chest, muskets, canvas, rope, and a small bronze gun that later gave the place its name. On the beach they rigged shelters from sailcloth and shattered spars. Life narrowed to jobs that could not be skipped. Men speared fish in the clear gutters over the reef, pried shellfish from rocks, and robbed nests for eggs. They dug shallow pits wherever the sand felt damp, waiting for brackish seep to gather, skimming scum, boiling the rest until it tasted less like metal and more like mercy. Every drop was counted. Tensions rose with the heat. Some blamed Steins, others saved it for the shade. Rations were weighed in the open and guarded like treasure. In the second week, a volunteer crew begged leave to take the longboat for Batavia. Nearly 3,000 kilometers of open water in a craft the sea would treat like a splinter. Steins let them go. Men waded out and shoved the boat through the surf. It climbed a swell and dwindled into the haze. Days passed. No sail returned. Gun Island began to collect graves. Shallow graves the wind fretted at night. A cook died of fever. A boy misjudged the reef and drowned in a pool that looked like glass until it wasn't. The surgeon worked with boiled knives and good hands. The wreck still clung to the reef. At slack water crews rowed out and stripped her like butchers. Planks pried loose, knees and ribs knocked free, fastenings hammered straight and saved in kettles, blocks, dead-eyes, coils of line, stained canvas, pitch scraped from seams. A wreck's treasure is wood, iron, rope, and time. One night, a cask bled. In the morning, the corporal stood beside it and said nothing. No one confessed. The ration was cut for everyone. The island felt smaller after that. On a glary noon, the carpenter drew a shape in the sand. If no ship comes, we make one. The beach was flat enough to lay a keel, and the Zeewijk held timber and iron enough to try. They would build a small sloop from a dead ship's bones. Planks bent over fire, seams caulked with oakum, pitch melted into every line. Work began before sunrise and ended after dark. On the island, the rhythm of work had kept despair from settling like dust. Each blow of the hammer said not yet. Each plank bent over fire said there is still a way. Even the gulls, thieves that they were, seemed to sense the change, wheeling and screaming whenever a new piece found its place. They raised a frame on trestles knocked together from wreck wood. Men bent planks over heat, rags around blistered hands. When squalls came, they lashed the hull to stakes and leaned their shoulders against her until the wind passed. But the boat grew, stubborn, low in the gunwales, thick through the waist, with a mast stepped stout and slightly forward so she would hold her wind. They carved a crude tiller and jury rudder and stitched a spare sail. The boatswain taught the youngest hands to feel wind they could not see. By late February 1728, 4 months after the wreck, the sloop, Slopey, was as ready as she would ever be. They greased the ways with tallow and heaved on lines. The boat slid, hesitated, then took the sea with a shiver felt in every man. A ragged cheer broke loose. They loaded her with the last of their wealth, casks in rope cradles, biscuits stowed high and dry, salted meat wrapped in canvas, spare spars, coils of line, the surgeon's instruments, a tinderbox, a small chest of papers no one could throw away. The captain paused at the little cannon and climbed aboard. Oars bit to clear the surf. The reef fell behind in white rips and green gutters where coral showed through like bone. When they reached clean sea, the patched sail climbed and filled. The Slopey leaned and began to run. A small boat at sea is a world you can touch. They learned her sounds in a day, the tick of a swelling seam, the slap under the stern when a following sea caught wrong, the soft complaint of a mast collar asking for grease. They bailed constantly. Oakum swells, but never perfectly. The boatswain lived by trim and taught the crew to hear the wind. The sea tested them twice. First came a squall that darkened the world by shades, then rain that stung. The Slopey slid into a trough and yawed. The rudder bit late and then true. Water came aboard in sheets. Men threw it back with buckets and curses. The storm lasted longer than courage, then passed. Calm was worse. The sail sagged, the boat wallowed, the sun pressed them flat. They rowed until their hands bled and kept rowing with bandaged palms. The surgeon told stories about winter in Amsterdam, canals singing under skates, breath blooming in lamplight, because sometimes the cure for heat is a remembered cold. There were mercies, flying fish, a night when the wake burned with tiny lights, a sudden sheet of rain to drink. A shark kept pace for a day. On a morning that smelled different, green and wet, birds began to fly with purpose. The sea shifted shade. Java lifted from the horizon like a promise kept. Men who had not wept on Gun Island wept for the sight of trees. The Slopey limped toward Batavia as if she knew she had earned it. They came into the harbor like ghosts in sailors' clothes, skin baked dark, eyes shocked by crowds and spice and smoke. Officials counted, questioned, and wrote. The harbor smelled of spice and tar and human heat, a shock after months of clean, merciless wind. Crowded quays clattered with carts and shouted bargains. The noise made their heads ring. Some men stood blinking like moles dragged into daylight, tasting fresh fruit and broth with a wonder they tried and failed to hide. The company's order returned with ledgers and seals. The survivors slept on real cots and woke from habit. An inquiry followed, charts, testimony, neat lines from decision to wreck. The company called it recklessness and clipped reputations. Among sailors, another story spread, less tidy, more human. A captain can be wrong and still keep men alive long enough to build a way out of ruin. As for the longboat, rumors drifted back. A fisherman selling water to thin Dutchmen, a trader who met 2 survivors and saw them no more. In clear weather, sailors said you could see the Zeewijk sleeping over Half Moon Reef, pale ribs on coral. The sea forgets slowly, islands forget faster. Still, at the right tide, you can find a rust-soft nail or a bead of tar, proof men wrote a way out onto a blank place. What remains is more than a caution. It is a map of stubbornness. Stranded on a strip of coral, they tore a ship apart and taught their hands a new shape, then sailed that shape across water that had already tried to kill them. The reef kept the ship, the island its graves, the sea its silence. The men kept a story. Thank you for listening to the Sunken Ledger. Subscribe for more true stories from the depths.